and welcome to the Top Corner Podcast, episode number 36, your weekly fix of all the latest news and talk within European football. We are back once again. It's the start of the season. This is our first proper episode, and we've got plenty to talk about from the Premier League to Syria. Big games to talk about this week, and lots to cover in the transfer window. So get yourself relaxed, sit back for the next hour and a half, and we're talking all things football. So get yourself ready, because the intro's nearly done. We do it every week. It's nearly over, and it's a shame because the boys can't hear it. And there we go, the intro's done. And as I said, it's a shame because the boys can't hear it. It's only me that can. Hopefully, at some point, we might finally be able to all hear it together and jam out to the music at the start. But how are we all doing, boys? Are we all good this week?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, the football's still going. We're doing all right.
It's fantastic indeed. How are we doing, Kieran D?
Right, lad, are you?
Yeah, not too bad. And as you perfectly said, Kieran L, we've got plenty of football to talk about on this week's edition of the show. And usually it would be out on a Wednesday before we spice things up, change the date slightly, stick it on a Thursday this time. But as we said, we've got a lot of football to talk about today. The transfer window is, of course, still open, so we'll probably be talking a little bit about transfers later on. But to give you kind of a rundown of what we're going to talk about and how the podcast has slightly changed as well, actually, because this is the first proper episode that we've done since we've returned. We've changed things a little bit. So the usual section at the start, which we talk about last week's games, we aren't going to continue that on, but we're not going to talk about the games as long as we used to. We're going to condense that down a little bit because we did used to talk for quite a bit about last week's game, and we want to talk a little bit more about the games to come. We can have debates and things like that in between, so we're going to start off with that in a moment's time. And then we've changed up the section as well for next week's games, of course, the ones that we look forward to. There's an opportunity for you guys to get involved, for you guys to actually pick out a game for us to talk about each week. So you can obviously keep your eyes out for that a little bit later on into the episode on the podcast. And of course, we've got plenty of other things in between that we'll be talking about. We do like to ramble on a little bit, and it's always nice. We love a little debate on this podcast, don't we? As Kieran, just a little bit, we like to go on about things in sports. But for the first section, I always like to ask you, your week in football, how's it been so far? We'll start off with Rowan, because last night we did a watch along. It was, not the best game for you in the world, but Oldham had a fantastic game.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking since the last podcast, we lost 3-0 at the weekend to Stevenage. Absolutely shocking. This is Oldham. And then we went and won 4-0 against Wolves under 21s last night. I've seen the goals. Two of them very good from McKelney. They're really lovely finishers. And two of them were goalkeeper mistakes. I think the one problem is Wolves under 21s. And you can't... There are positives you can take. At the end of the day, you are playing against a team of youngsters. We have a blend of both, and unfortunately, you can't say, "Oh well, great, we're going to get a result this weekend." Because we beat a Wolves. We beat Wolves academy team, and then Slavia Praga didn't play good yesterday. Didn't play all. It was Kolar who kept them in the game. We talked about the watch along yesterday. That 90th minute save, pure instinct, pure goalkeeping instinct.
It was absolutely unbelievable. But a 4-0 win for Oldham is a fantastic result. Yeah. Even if it is against Wolves under 21, still a very good result.
It's the one thing I want to ask about. With the leasing.com, do you think the under 21s team should be in it? Also, Kieran, your experience it for the first time this year. Josh, you had it last year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe these under 21 sides should be in? Because for me, personally, it doesn't really like. If it was the Wolves side, perfect. But because it's that academy team, we're not benefiting off it. The all academy team 100% are benefiting because they're playing against a League One side, probably clubs that these youngsters will go to on loan, and so they're getting the feel for that game. Whereas for us, it's just congestion fixturing. I would prefer it if it was all League One and League Two clubs all played in that. No Championship, no Premier League as it is, but not even the academies. Because then, let's say we picked up a 4-0 win over, I'm looking for someone in that, Grimsby.
Mm-hmm.
That shows that we can be competitive in the league form.
No,
I'm not about in terms of our group.
Right.
I'm about if we had like 3 other League 2 and League 1s. If we picked a win over Grimsby, it proved that we could be competitive in the league. But because we've got it over the academy, people just say, "Oh, you beat the academy boys." It's like,
think-
let's say if you beat, sorry, I was going to say, let's say you
Sorry.
beat a City or a United or an Arsenal, Liverpool academy team. It doesn't mean anything because it's academy practically.
I think it goes both ways, doesn't it? For like Rowan said, like teams like Oldham and the other EFL teams, it's not very beneficial. But for the under 21s and stuff, it's very beneficial because they're playing against actual professionals. It's better than playing other academy sides, I think.
I also think there's not enough teams. I think the only reason they're in there is because to have like a kind of
Even
like a tournament, because they have the North and South in Leasing.com, don't they?
Yeah.
So I don't think they had enough teams to create a fluent tournament. So they needed to fill each group up with one more team. So they might as well just go with academies, because if they're not lucky enough to go out on loan, they've got at least something that gives them a taste of league football, because not everyone can go out on loan. So it kind of gives that. But I agree, for me, it's our first year in it. Would I like to win it? Yeah, it's a trophy. But for most teams, as it is for us as well, would I rather focus on the league? Hell yeah.
I think that's where the problem lies with it. I think if you look at how the tournament's set up, kind of half of the teams are like, we're not really too fussed about it. It's just an extra couple of games. And then obviously for the academy teams, you kind of look at it in a way and think, well, why not go on and win it? Because it's a trophy at the end of the day, and no matter whether it be a big trophy or not to people, it's still a piece of silverware that these players can go and strive for and win. And of course for you, Kieran D, your team's not in it, but your academy players are. And as you said earlier, what do you look at it from the perspective of being a United fan? Do you think it's a good competition for the under-23s, or do you think there should be kind of a different tournament set up for them?
Well, it's exciting to see the young players play, and of course we beat I don't know what to call them, because Salford were in the final last year. Our under 21s beat them 6-0. It isn't fair, I don't think, because I agree with what Rowan said, because it's not beneficial for the sides, the EFL sides, but it is beneficial for the under 21 sides. So it goes both ways, but I think I'm on Rowan's side. But as a Man United fan, it is exciting to see the youth prospects more than once a week.
It's a good opportunity for them indeed, but it's an interesting debate, that actually. It'll be something we might have to come on to in the future with the actual competition itself, because there's a lot of talking points about the whole Leasing.com trophy in general, how some people think it's a shambles, the attendance at the beginning of the tournament was really poor, but well worth holding on to that. We might have to talk about that in the future. But we're going to go from the Leasing.com trophy to another competition called the Carabao Cup. Now, of course, Kieran, Hull City had a... I'd say, what would you think? Because it's not a bad week overall.
No. Looking, league-wise, we were 100%. We're 2 wins for 2. Happy days. I couldn't be happier with the way our league form has gone. We've not conceded a goal yet, which is lovely to see. But that game in midweek, yeah, we lost 5-1. It was a free hit, really. We got past Leeds. That's all that mattered to me. Anyway, once we did that, the Carabao Cup was completed for the year, to be honest. I didn't really care about the round after. And the only dark mark on it was the whole COVID kind of thing about the lineups. That's the only dark mark on the whole game, because should it have gone ahead, should it not? I think that's a whole different debate for a different time. Why are test results coming in an hour before kick-off and letting them arrive? And then there's not enough clear to describe that. But overall for Hull, a good week. But aside from a Hull City love, there is a love for Alireza Jahanbakhsh, who got 2 goals in the cup as well. Just goal and assist, sorry.
Just got to sneak it in there while you can. Why not? Got to put it in there. It was a good performance though from him, and of course, Hull, not bad performance in the league so far, as you said. No goals conceded yet. Hopefully, they can keep that good run of form going. As for Rotherham United, we did lose to Millwall. 2 games that we've had at the start of the season that aren't exactly the most appealing games in the world, with Wickham and Millwall, but with Millwall, you expect what you expect. You go to the ground expecting them to play very, not defensive, but they have a very set system that they'll play, and they played that way. And it was a mistake at the back from us, which, to be fair, it's a shame. But at the end of the day, 1-0 against Millwall, not a bad result considering how well Millwall have done in the last season or two, especially under Gary Rowett now. They've done very, very well indeed. But it's not just us that unfortunately got a loss as well. I'm not going to delve on this one a little bit too much, but of course, Manchester United starting the Premier League, unfortunately, with a loss against Crystal Palace. But a win against Luton Town in the Carabao Cup means you are through to the next round. It's positives and negatives for United.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I didn't want to delve on the Premier League result too much because I guess, Palace had already had a couple of games and this is Manchester United. Was Man United's first game.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that excuse. The thing that it's like we haven't had a pre-season, it's not an excuse. Our players, like you're getting paid pretty much. That is their job. Like, I don't care about rustiness and that, but it's just, yeah.
Make sure you don't have to delve about it. You've got another game coming up at the weekend. It's against Brighton, I think, on Saturday morning, if I'm correct.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely shitting myself.
Ali Reza.
Saw how well they played last week.
You never know. They've had a really good start, Brighton. Yeah, we watched that game against Chelsea, didn't we? Which they did quite well in that match, and of course they did well again in the game against Newcastle. But we're going to move on now to last week's fixtures. In a moment, we're going to talk, as I said, it's not going to be a long section this, but we're going to kind of condense it down a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the games last week. Now, last week we didn't actually pick any games out, of course, because we were doing our predictions for the season ahead. So what I've done is I've collated some of this week's results, some of the games that you guys have watched, some of the games you might not have watched through the 5 main European leagues, and we're going to have a quick talk about them and talk about those important talking points, especially from one certain game in the Premier League, which we'll talk about now in a moment's time. So we now move on to the games of the past week, as I said a moment ago, and it was a very event-filled Premier League weekend of action. We're going to be talking about Chelsea versus Liverpool, which was certainly a dramatic game in itself, but we had plenty of goals in the Premier League this weekend. There was of course, a hat-trick for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, the 5-2 win against West Brom. There was 4 goals for Leicester against Burnley. Liverpool getting their 2-0 win. There was just goals all over the park and plenty of dramatic moments as well, of course. 2 red cards in the West Brom game. There was a certain acrobatic kick that was given as a red card in the Brighton game, which was a controversial decision in itself. And then some interesting things going on in the game we're going to talk about now, which, as I said, is Chelsea versus Liverpool. Now, Chelsea, they have made a lot of stellar signings this season. Within the transfer window, of course, we know that they brought in the likes of Ziyech, Thiago Silva and Chilwell, which all didn't feature in this fixture, and we should start to see some of these players actually come back soon. I know Thiago Silva is supposed to potentially have an opportunity to play in the Carabao Cup, so we might see him when this recording goes out. He might have already played, but it was an interesting game because before the end of the first half, Andreas Christensen, he got himself sent off after taking down Mane in what would have been a 1-versus-1 situation against Kepa. Now, I didn't get to watch this game. I know you boys was able to watch this game, so clear decision, correct, from the referee?
We were screaming, weren't we, Kieran? We were absolutely screaming at the TV. I don't know how the referee gets that wrong.
I think it's what we've always said. We don't always thank VAR, but also just proves how bad referees are in this country, because that is a blatant red card, because Mane is about a toe away from the ball when Christensen decides to take a ride on his back to the ground. So it's a clear red card, and it just proves that defensive frailties, a 36-year-old Thiago Silva is needed because AC is just terrible.
And it's crazy because I did actually watch the highlights for it, and you can see he's tussling Mane. He's literally wrapped his arms around him. There's no chance that he can get away from him. And of course, he gets the red card just before the end of the first half. Chelsea down to 10 men, not what you want when you go into the second half, because that's when Mane started to run wild. It took him, it was 2 goals in 4 minutes actually for Mane. The first, it was a lovely connection between the front line. It was 1-2 passing between Salah and Firmino. The ball was whipped in by Firmino. It was headed home by Mane. It was a lovely finish, really nice, well-worked goal from Liverpool. Apart from the second, which is going to be a talking point for us in a moment, because we haven't actually been able to talk about him since we started the podcast. The second goal, it came out of nowhere. It was actually an assist for Kepa Arrizabalaga, whose initial pass, he intended it for Jorginho, who was just outside of the box. He's pretty much directly towards him, but you can see Mane on the left-hand side. He comes in, Kepa makes the pass, it goes straight to Mane, who has the easiest of finishes to leave Liverpool with 2 wins out of 2. Fantastic start for them. As for Chelsea, they did get that win against Brighton, of course, which was a great result for them. Didn't play spectacularly, amazingly well, but there is one serious problem right now for Chelsea, and it's the defence. And, of course, the more glaringly obvious problem is the goalkeeper. Now, we know Kepa Arrizabalaga has made a lot of mistakes since he's come in from Athletic Bilbao. You know, the highest paid goalkeeper in terms of how much they spent for him in the history of Chelsea. It's a hell of a lot of money. And it seems to be mistake after mistake after mistake. Now, we know Edouard Mendy of Stade Rennes looks like he's going to be joining in the next couple of days. It seems to be a situation that has been ongoing for a couple of weeks now, but it looks like it's finally going to happen. Chelsea are going to get their new goalkeeper. The question is, what happens for Kepa? Because mistake after mistake after mistake, somehow he's still at Chelsea. Do you see him staying or do you see him going?
I think he needs his confidence.
Yeah,
Like, he's lost it somewhere. I don't know where it was. He's lost it. And go back to Spain, go back to your home country, where you're a bit more familiar. Obviously, the thing on your head is always going to be that price tag. But I think Chelsea will just want to get rid of him for maybe his sake and for the club's sake. If you've got Caballero there, who's a good backup, you probably don't need to. If you want to keep Kepa as a backup, keep him. But I think for you, it'd be better just get rid of him. And then, personally for Kepa, go back to Spain or go to a different country and just get your confidence back. Because he's not a bad goalkeeper. He does make saves. It's just he's so error prone that he's such a risky asset for a club. Well, for Chelsea.
He is a risky asset. Is anybody in the camp of disagreeing, maybe thinking Kepa should stay and when Edouard Mendy comes in, maybe get a little bit more of a bit of training time with him and kind of develop as a player?
No, he needs to go.
No,
in my opinion. I agree with what Rowan said.
The question is, if he was to go, I'll ask Kieran now before I answer this question actually. If he was to go, I'll give you a little bit of thinking time here. Where does he go? Is there a specific club out there
already.
that, you know...
Go back to Bilbao.
Bilbao?
My point was actually kind of, you say stay or go, both. I think you should go out on loan because my belief is they want to recoup some of the money they spent because, let's be fair, they are not getting north of 25 million for Kepa on the form he's on right now. I don't believe, anyway. So if he goes out on loan, like Courtois did to Atletico, I know they sold him a few years later, but proves himself somewhere else, and then go, well, if you want him permanently, pay us 50, and then they've got something back from what they paid originally. So for me, that's what I'd do. I'd loan him out for now. And I agree with Rowan to the fact that for me, I think I spoke about Will, obviously, was round on the weekend to watch the game. Kepa was doomed from the very start. I believe he was, with the price tag, the nature of the deal, because Courtois went very late in the window. It was a deadline day, I'm pretty sure, or day before deadline day signing of Kepa. So I just believe he wasn't in the right scenario at the right time. It was a desperation move on both parties, which always led to the moment he made a mistake, everyone would just go, waste of money. And then that has led to what we've got now. I don't think he's a bad goalkeeper. I think if he goes somewhere else, he'll re-find the Kepa that obviously was worth 80 million, he never was, but recoup some form that's been lost. That's my belief, and I don't know where I see him going, but somewhere on loan back in Spain.
I think your mind worry is if he goes out on loan, what if he has a bad loan spell? Then his stock will plummet even more. But for me, it's just that personal thing of true. I think it's just that personal thing for him of it's not the right fit. He's clearly. It's that price tag, and I think that's unfortunately the way football's gone. This in the past couple of years is players that probably aren't worth what they're being sold for. That pressure now on them players to step up is on such a higher level that it can just capitulate.
I think, of course, the goalkeeper is probably one of the hardest positions to play in football today. But I think for Chelsea, there's a bigger widespread problem, and like you mentioned, Josh, that's the defence. I mean, if Thiago Silva was to get injured, imagine or Ben Chilwell, for example, the back four of Reece James is absolutely fine, but Kurt Zouma and Antonio Rudiger aren't good enough. And Marcus Alonso has been probably past it for about a year now. I think they're in a similar situation to Liverpool, where if any of those front three or the midfield get injured, they've got a really big problem. I mean, I have no idea why he took Havertz off on Sunday, but they just lacked so much creativity, even though they had three CAMs on the pitch. at once. They just lacked creativity. Timo Werner did well, to be honest, to get on the end of a few balls, but he looks like he's lacking a little bit of sharpness. Don't know if that's rustiness or anything, but I think the problem for Chelsea, like you said, is probably the defence and the lack of real quality and depth.
The question is then, and of course we still now have a little bit of time with the window left, and they are bringing in Mendy, of course. Which do you think he's going to be the right man to take the role? It looks like you expect him to be the person that comes in to start. He was fantastic at Stade Rennes, didn't concede a great deal of goals while he was at the club, and it seems to be that Frank Lampard likes him a lot. Do you think he's the right man to come in for Kepa, or do you think it's a big gamble in itself, taking a goalkeeper from Ligue 1?
Never seen him play.
Never seen him play?
Seen him play. I mean, you might as well take a punt on someone. I mean, they took a punt on Kepa, it's turned out bad, but this time might come out good.
And I mean, at least this time, they're not spending a lot of money as well, so...
I wouldn't be surprised if the Caballero starts like the first 3 games. I think it's the same with why he took Havertz off. I think he will want to not trust play, but get to know him first. So, like you said, I don't understand why. I think he's played with Mason, he's managed Mason Mount for longer, 2 years now, nearly. So he will be more familiar, and he can probably go to Mason, do this, and Mason will listen. Whereas I think Havertz, obviously, he's only just come in, so it might take a little bit of time for that relationship to get better. And you can sort of say to him, "I'm just going to take you off just because I know Mason better at this point." I think it could be the same with Mendy. Let Mendy blend into the club. Don't put him straight into the deep end. Give Caballero a couple of games. Hopefully they get rid of Kepa. Because I think if they get rid of Kepa, Caballero would be fine to sit on the subs bench again. I'm just worried that, if Kepa doesn't go, you're going to have Kepa who will want to fight for his place, and then Mendy have that in the back of the head, like, well, I've got Kepa literally sniffing down my back. Because there's other keepers where they're not worried, Alisson and Adrian. Alisson's not going to be worried that Adrian's going to be a better keeper than him.
Which is a very fair point indeed. The last question I'll ask, based on the Chelsea-Liverpool game, is, as you've perfectly said, Rowan, maybe it's an opportunity for them to sell Kepa, but on the other hand, we've got about a week and a half left of the transfer window. Can you see Chelsea making any more signings, any last-minute deals that crop up, any players who get transfer listed with a couple of days ago? Can you see Chelsea making any more signings, or do you think once Mendy has come in, that is it, the business is done at Chelsea, and what they've got now is what they're going to have until January?
Well, I mean, the rumours they're going after Declan Rice, aren't they, as well? I still think they need another midfielder.
Do you think it's possible?
No.
I think they're done for this window, especially. I think they've gone and done some really astute business. They've managed to get some really good players in, and I'm sure they'll come good. You see that the Havertz and Werner thing already, but they'll be fine. They'll get to know, and they'll be good in the league. And you forget, Ziyech hasn't come in yet, so yeah, he's playing Mason Mount for now. But wait till Hakim Ziyech gets in there, and that just adds just another level of creativity. And I do agree, Chilwell is so much better than Marcus Alonso, it's not even funny. So they will get better.
We might come back in 3 weeks and be talking about how Chelsea's the best side in the Premier League. I think we seem to forget that when Thiago Silva comes in, you're going to have Christensen, Zouma and Rudiger all learning off Thiago Silva, who's been one of the best centre-halves for a while now. They'll be learning off him, and that's obviously sure going to boost their playing style. And like you said, when Ziyech comes in, when Chilwell comes in, I think we'll be talking about Chelsea in a very different way.
Do you know, Josh, I don't know if you mind me asking, why do you think Malang Sarr's not coming straight into the starting 11 and going out on loan instead? Because I don't know about you guys, I think he's easily their first, if not second best centre-half.
I don't think he's good enough for them right now, if I'm being honest. I think he would be in a similar calibre to the likes of a Rudiger and Christensen. I think he should have stayed, but been given a little bit more experience under Thiago Silva, so he can learn off of a veteran, an experienced, incredible centre-back. But I guess at the same time, it's just the amount of centre-backs they've got right now. It must be so hard for Lampard to kind of juggle them all about.
I also think one of the problems is that Thiago Silva is 36 now. Mm-hmm. He's probably only going to give you 1 year, maybe 2 at most, and then he'll be gone.
Oh, go on.
I was saying one thing I'd like to see is maybe Sarr go on loan to a lower, not lower side Premier League club, but that mid-table, just so he gets experience of playing against Premier League. Because I think Thiago's have come in, he's played the Champions League, he's played against Premier League teams, he'll know how them teams play. But Malang Sarr's only played in Ligue 1. And so maybe you send him out on loan. I'm trying to think of a mid-table team who need a centre-back.
Like a Newcastle.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at it, one, I disagree, Josh. He can't be worse than Andreas Christensen or on the same level as Andreas Christensen. I refuse to believe it because he is awful.
He's
But
good. He's good, but I just don't think Lampard needs him right now.
yeah, and they've still got Ethan Ampadu, who they've just sent on loan to Sheffield United, and I don't know where he fits into the fold because I think we've heard rumours that they want to loan out for Kyle Tomori as well, who last season arguably was the best centre half they had. You know, some players were out, they weren't very good, but he was arguably the best of a bad bunch. So I just don't understand. Like, I don't even think they know what their best centre back pairing is, and that might be trouble for them if they don't know their solid back four that they can play week in week out. Because if you look at Liverpool, it's usually the same four. That second centre half spot's usually up for grabs, but that's because Matip's always injured. So, you know, a team that has a steady back four is always going to be successful. So that might be their only problem come the end of the season.
Absolutely. And the thing is as well, Malang Sarr is still technically at the club, so maybe we could be talking in a week's and a half time, and he's still there. You don't know, but I think as a backup player, he's a very good option, I agree with you, but maybe not right now what Chelsea needs to come straight in and try and get them to the next level. But as you perfectly said there, if you are chopping and changing your team all the time, it could leave you with some defensive frailties. But as we said, they've still got plenty more signings to come in. And just very, very quickly, talk about the other side. One new signing that did come in for 45 minutes was former Bayern Munich midfielder and European champion, Thiago. Fantastic performance for him and made the most passes in 45 minutes in the Premier League, according to Opta Joe. Fantastic performance for him. And do you think he can fit into the Liverpool mould and help them to try and challenge for the title?
Well, we were just talking about Liverpool back four, and honestly, I think their best centre-half partnership is Fabinho and Van Dijk. Put Thiago in that defensive midfielder role, and there you go, Bob's your uncle. Wijnaldum and Keita in front of him, or Henderson, for example. Liverpool are just so stacked, and Thiago just oozes his class. He was absolutely fantastic.
He was, but he gave away a penalty. But no, overall he was good. You know, it was a very soft penalty anyway, but I think he just adds, he can dictate a game. He decides the pace of the game. He will. A team can come up with a game plan and he can change it with his passing and even some of the passes he were attempting to unlock defences. Yes, they weren't 100%, but the guy hasn't played really since the Champions League final because he obviously didn't get to play for Bayern Munich, I don't think, before the season started. So he was trying it. It wasn't up to full speed, but when he was that good and he wasn't up to full speed yet, he's going to be masterful to watch.
Absolutely indeed. So that is the Chelsea-Liverpool game. Fantastic win for Liverpool. Of course, we're actually going to be talking about them a little bit later on because the Premier League, I think, has got a very good game this weekend with Liverpool, I'm pretty sure. But as for now, we're going to move on to a very good game in the Bundesliga. We talked about a player who's just moved from Bayern Munich. It's time to talk about Bayern Munich. So we're now going to move on to the Bundesliga, where there was a fantastic game to start the season with the European champions Bayern Munich. What a game of football this was. 8-0 against an already struggling Schalke 04. It saw 6 different goal scorers. There was a Gnabry hat-trick, the new signing Leroy Sané, he got on the goal-scoring mark as well. There was a sensational Rabona assist from Robert Lewandowski for the 6th goal of the game. And well, for Schalke, the struggle has already kicked in. We talked about them last season being absolutely terrible when 2020 started. They're now 17 league games in a row without a win, if you of course include the start of the season into that. It begs the question, I'm going to ask this in a second, why and how is David Wagner still in charge of the German club when we talked about him before being potentially up for the sack at the end of the season? And the pressure's already building. Apparently, it was rumoured that with Schalke's next game, which they play Werder Bremen, if they don't win, Wagner might already be sacked after 2 games, which in retrospective would be a shocking decision. But let's be real, at the same time, with how poor Schalke have been, it was expected many, many months ago. As for Bayern, the run for the 9th consecutive Bundesliga title starts with a bang. They've got the Super Cup coming up, which will have probably actually finished by the time that this video goes live, or might have not been played yet. But the real question that is not on everyone's lips, but on Schalke fans' lips, why and how is David Wagner still in charge of the club? Can anybody tell me why?
I think probably because, well, if you can remember what Rowan said, about them not wanting to get a new manager because of COVID. That is probably still the reason.
I don't think it is this time because you've seen transfers have happened.
Yeah.
So a manager is technically a transfer. It's one of the strangest decisions. Even now, we talked about it every single week on them Bundesliga watch-alongs. How is he still in a job? And we're nearly 2 months after that, and he's just lost 8-0, and he's somehow still got the job. He's got to have some dirt on the chairman or something. He's got to have... It's mental.
Maybe they just said to him, we'll give you a start of the season, see how you do. And of course, I mean, getting beat 8-0 in your first game is not the best way to go about like a second chance route, but I think it's a matter of time.
As a man who can pitch in about managers outstaying the welcome when the form's been terrible, I'm going to say, no, I don't know how he's got the job. I don't. I mean, some managers get 5 games or 6 games. Remember Frank de Boer for Crystal Palace? They get 5 or 6 games and they're out of job. Maybe it was more the fact that Schalke last year, it was more a case of they weren't going to get Europe, they weren't going to get relegated, so it was kind of just sticking with it and just kind of riding the course maybe till the end of the season. But I don't understand why they didn't get a manager in who could get his own players in, who could get his own style of play across in this off-season to then go forward to this campaign. But, I mean, if you really want to make a mark in a new season and say you've turned it around, an 8-0 loss is the complete incorrect way to do that.
And I was going to go into that point, what you said perfectly there, Kieran, Al. The fact that they should have probably brought someone in pre-season who can get their own tactics and their own players. You know, Schalke, they haven't got a lot of cash, but whatever cash they've got to spend, you would assume the new manager would want to come in and make a couple of signings. They've already lost the likes of Weston McKennie. He's off to Juventus on loan, which he played, which I'll be talking about in a little bit, in their game at the weekend in Italy. So they've lost a couple of big players already, and it shocks me because, as I said, I'm repeating the stat once again, it's 17 league games now, including the game against Bayern, without a win. They did pick up a win or there, you know, here and there in the DFB Pokal. I think they picked up a win and things like that last season. But in the league, they haven't won in 2020 yet, which is a real worry. And it just sounds like, as Rowan said, he's got a little bit of dirt on the chairman.
I think one thing we can't take away from this is Bayern's performance.
No.
Like, as crap as Schalke were, Bayern were class. I mean, the Lewandowski assist, Musiala being the youngest ever Bayern goal scorer in the Bundesliga, Serge Gnabry just running absolutely wild, Sane scoring on his debut. They are unbelievable. There's a reason we chose them. And you look at the table, and there's only one big team that we all... Well, there's 2 big teams that we predicted will be in that top 4 area that actually picked up 3 points. That were Leipzig and Dortmund. And they weren't really convincing. Dortmund 3-0, Leipzig 3-1, and then you had Gladbach and Gladbach losing and Leverkusen drawing. He just already feels like they're going to run away with it, even if it's on goal difference.
I think there's no chance of any other team winning that Bundesliga title for maybe 3 or 4 more years, because that team is so insane.
Right. Would you be surprised if they went invincible?
No.
I genuinely wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it'll happen, but I wouldn't be surprised because the way I know they dispatched Schalke 8, but again, they put 8 past Barcelona, and they're 10 times the team Schalke are.
And arguably they're stronger now.
That's the insane part. Leroy Sané didn't get a hat-trick of assists, I think he got.
Yes, he did.
On his debut, and I just looked at the Schalke side, and it's not the worst side in the Bundesliga, but to get destroyed like that, there has to be some sort of change because it's not.
I think there's a real chance that Schalke could be this year's Werder Bremen in the case of like the big team that's down at the bottom, because that's how they're struggling, and they've got a very young squad, of course.
Yeah, to be fair, after this opening weekend, Werder Bremen are the Werder Bremen because they lost again. So they look like they're going down. So I don't know. It's weird. Maybe we're seeing that sort of thing because remember. Stuttgart went down a couple of years ago, and they'd been a Bundesliga mainstay for a couple of years before that. So it is one of them leagues where anyone can go down and Bayern will win it all the time. I was going to say anyone can win it, but no, they can't. Bayern will.
Bayern are just too bloody ruthless right now. You look at the team, and as you said, it really does feel like they could go unbeaten all season. You never know. You really never know. I mean, it's ruthless right now. Hansi Flick, of course, incredible manager. 8 goals in the first game. It's crazy. And they've got that Supercup game on Thursday, which is against Sevilla. You could see that being a great match because Sevilla themselves have looked quite all right. But compared to the Bayern side, and this Bayern side is just a monster right now. Another Champions League, of course. We're going to be talking about that in a few weeks' time when the draw takes place. Does anyone think they could go back-to-back and do Real Madrid?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Sure.
They could, but it's
hard.
always more. I was going to say it's always more difficult to defend your title, and it'll be interesting to see at the time when this gets played. Obviously, the knockout stages. Will we be back to 2 legs or not? Because we obviously don't know. So, I would back any team to get beat by Bayern over 2 legs, but I don't think it's as easy to defend the Champions League as it is the league, especially in Germany.
The playoffs are 2 legs, aren't they? The Champions League playoffs. So I would imagine that the actual league will be 2 legs as well. Just get a bit more normality back into competition.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to be sticking for now, unless anything changes with the COVID situation.
Yeah, I think if they go invincible, they won't win the Champions League. If they go win the Champions League, they will go invincible. I don't think they'll be able to do both just with Thingy, but just to see what they prioritise, really. I also want to say that the mental thing is that Javi Martinez didn't come on, and Martinez didn't really play much, and Alphonso Davies come on, and they still won 8-0. The only 2 other people that didn't come on were Ulrich and Alexander Nubel, yet they still dispatched the team 8-0. Unbelievable.
It's the strength in depth, isn't it? It's unbelievable right now for Bayern Munich. And as I said, they've got plenty of games to come. As for Schalke, as we just talked about Werder Bremen, they've actually got to face Werder Bremen at the weekend. So that could be a very good game indeed in terms of 2 teams that could already be scrapping at the bottom end of the table. But of course, we might not be talking about David Wagner being in the job next week if they do lose to Werder Bremen. And there could be more players leaving the club as well. I know Ozan Kabak, the Turkish centre-back, he's been linked with a move to Liverpool. They're eyeing him up, so maybe he could go, maybe he doesn't. But we'll have to find out. But that is the Bayern Munich game against Schalke. We're now going to move on to the last league for now. Haven't picked Ligue 1 this week. There wasn't really a big game going on, but there's been a hell of a lot of red cards recently. In fact, there's been about 25 in about 25 games. It's mental. It's like every week there's at least 1 yellow card coming out. And then in La Liga as well, there hasn't really been many big fixtures. Real Madrid, they picked up a 0-0 draw against Real Sociedad. A little bit disappointing for them to start the season with only a point, but Real Sociedad been a fantastic team in the last couple of weeks. But we're going to move on to Serie A, and we're going to talk about AC Milan and Juventus. So this is it for Games of the Week section. A little bit shorter, as I said, than we were doing last year. The last league we're going to look at for now is Serie A. Now, Serie A did start up this weekend as well, and what a way to start up with some fantastic results across the board in Italy. Now, I've picked out 2 sides this week to talk about. One of them is Juventus and one of them is AC Milan. Now, I've picked out AC Milan this week because a lot of us put them in our predictions for the top 4, and they started very, very well. Now, although it's the start of a new season, it's a certain veteran who keeps consistently putting his name into the hat, potentially for top scorer and just being AC Milan's best player. Of course, it's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the unbelievable 38-year-old, that's right, he's 38 now, 38-year-old Swede scored 2 goals against Bologna to open AC Milan's season in style, and it was a fantastic game of football for the home side. Just looking right now with the stats, you saw that Zlatan Ibrahimovic, it was a classic header to start off, really good header, lobbed in from the left-hand side. He's got acres of space, and it's the most simplest of finishes for a player like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And then he also picked up a penalty, which he's able to slot home in front of fans in the San Siro, which is always fantastic to see. Of course, right now in England, we don't have any fans in the stadiums, but in the likes of Italy and Germany, we are getting fans back. As for AC Milan, 2-0 win to start the season, 3 points on the table, plenty of new big signings, including the likes of Sandro Tonali from Brescia. They brought in Brahim Diaz from Real Madrid. It's a great start overall, but my question to ask about AC Milan, just how good of a signing was Zlatan Ibrahimovic?
I mean, he was fantastic when we had him. And that was 2-3 years ago. And I thought at that point, 35 years old, he's past it. But he is proving that he is one of the best ever, I think.
He put a post up on Twitter the other day, and it just said Benjamin Button, because he doesn't seem like he ages, and that's from the man himself. And we thought, I'll be honest, if it was the knee injury at United that I thought would end it, It was the damaging injury for AC Milan that he occurred. I thought he's gone after that and he won't be back to his best. But this man, genuinely, I don't know if he's made out of sheet metal or something because he just keeps getting better and he just doesn't seem breakable at all. And he could have had a hat-trick. I remember seeing a chance that he had on the right-hand side and he should have got it in, but it went just past the crossbar. So I think just in terms of a player, but also in terms of a character, that has made AC Milan a much more feared opponent with Zlatan because he brings the confidence, he brings the swagger, and he just improves the game of everybody around him.
He absolutely does indeed. He's had such a great start to the season already. As for AC Milan, as I said before, they've made a couple of decent transfers themselves. They're still looking in the window maybe to bring in one or two more players. They were linked with Bakayoko, former AC Milan player, trying to bring him back on loan. We said before about AC Milan maybe being up there for the Champions League. And it was actually quite a while ago where we could have been sat here today talking about a brand new manager as well. They were linked to Ralf Rangnick, of course, formerly of RB Leipzig. He was linked with a move to AC Milan, was about to join, then the deal got cancelled, and a week later he signed a new contract with RB Leipzig before leaving the club a week later. So just a crazy situation going on there in Germany. Stefano Pioli, was it the right decision, do you think, to stick with a manager who's doing so well, or do you think they should have taken that punt and brought in Ralf Rangnick to try and revitalise AC Milan?
If it's not broke, don't fix it. They were on an unbelievable run. Why would you change it at all? It was like, do you remember when Duncan Ferguson took over at Everton? And they were like, oh, keep him on, he's got the boys playing. But unless you're bringing in a name like Carlo Ancelotti that you can trust in enough, because as you said, it was a punt. So if that punt goes wrong, you have undone the years of hard work that went into rebuilding AC Milan to the team they once were. So it was not worth the risk. The reward wasn't worth it because, yeah, what's the realistic aim for AC Milan? Top 4. It would still be that under Pioli anyway, and it'd be the same under Rangnick. So for me, they made the right decision in sticking with the man that they had that was getting them playing as well. And the players look like they're playing for him. So why change anything? That was always my opinion. I think I said this to you, Josh, when we did the podcast. When we were back at our homes, I was like, why are they even considering another manager when they've won so many games? And hopefully he can bring them back to Champions League football because AC Milan have been out of it for too long now.
They have. It's been too long without them in the Champions League, and hopefully we might see them back in it this season. We, in fact, might see them in the Europa League for the first time in quite a while. They were actually in it last season before they got booted out because of FFP. They're now back in it again, and they might have a very, very tasty qualifying fixture against Besiktas next week, which is a very tasty game. That should be a Champions League fixture within itself, to be honest. But very good game of football that will be. And as for AC Milan, it's a great start to the season. A 2-0 win overall against Bologna. What a way to start for Stefano Pioli. There's one more game to talk about in Serie A this week, and it is with the Italian Stallions in Juventus. Of course, they brought in a brand new manager not too long ago in Andrea Pirlo, who took over Maurizio Sarri, nearly said Maurizio Pochettino there. Not the right manager, of course, I think should have come into the club. But it was Andrea Pirlo who came in, and it was a fantastic start for Juventus as they got themselves a 3-0 win over Sampdoria. So what I put down for this game overall is that the Italian champions, they started their season in style. The new manager, Andrea Pirlo, coming in. Eyebrows were raised at the choices of players within the starting 11. They decided to play Danilo at centre-back. Weston McKennie, he came in for his first game at the club, of course, joining from Schalke, which I'm thinking he's probably very glad that he's not at the club anymore right now, considering the state of the club itself. And they also signed Dejan Kulusevski. He came in for this game. Fantastic signing. They brought him in a couple of months ago. First match for him as well. And it was a good game for them overall. It would be the Swede that would strike first in the 13th minute. It was a curling effort from just inside the box. Lovely finish from a player that I think we'll see a little bit more of in the near future at the club. Their second goal came in the 78th minute. It came from a corner. Poor clearance from the Sampdoria backline, which led to a very simple tap-in for Bonucci at the back. And then finally, of course, who else is going to score in this game and get himself off the mark? Cristiano Ronaldo. He had a shot from the far right-hand side, just inside of the box. It rolled into the back of the net. It was a simple finish for the Portuguese striker to give Juventus a 3-0 win overall and a fantastic start for Andrea Pirlo. Now, we didn't actually get to talk about this, to be honest. We, of course, wasn't doing the podcast at the time. Andrea Pirlo, brand new manager of Juventus, originally was signed signed as the under-23s manager. 1 week later was taken up to the actual Juventus manager job, which must be the quickest improvement in a position in history of football. Was it the right decision? Because there was other managers out there, like Maurizio Pochettino, who I did say a moment ago. Other big managers still available. Conte at the time was looking potentially like he was going to leave. Do you think this is the right decision to bring Pirlo in, or should they have gone for a more experienced manager?
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Really, I think that's the only judgment I can make, because for as much as, a gamble pays off to, not a gamble, sorry, bringing in an experienced manager helps. I mean, what would Bayern Munich have done if they'd have brought in an experienced manager and not brought in just next man up, which was Hansi Flick at the time? And look, they're now a force to be reckoned with. I agree, because Hansi Flick had been there a while, whereas Pirlo had been there about a week.
I think that's a bit sus.
Yeah, that I think maybe that was always in the pipeline, but he'll command respect from everyone in that dressing room, and players that weren't there for Sarri will have enough respect for Pirlo to be there for him. And so I do think you always get that with a former player that's been at the club, and it is a club legend by no one will question that. But it'll be weird for Buffon seeing his former teammate in charge at training and not joining in.
I think one thing I like by is Juventus have done everything, apart from obviously the Champions League. They sort of run Serie A. Obviously, last year was a lot closer. Why not take a punt? You could sort of afford to not win the league for one season and see how Pirlo works. Pirlo will be adored by the fans. Like you said, the players have so much respect for him. He's an Italian legend and a footballing legend. I think, why not take that risk?
Can you afford to not win the league? Because Sarri won the league and got sacked. So can you really afford not to win it?
But was Pirlo always in the plans anyway? So regardless if Sarri didn't win the league, I think he was going anyway.
Well, if he won the I think the big thing is the Champions League. And amazingly, I'm pretty sure that was obviously, I think, what Pirlo wanted to win with Juventus. I remember the final they played in when they had Pogba, and that he really wanted to win that. And so does Buffon. I think Buffon's not retiring until he gets it. So that'll be another piece that Pirlo really wants. And if you can't get it as a player, next best thing.
Well, as they always say, no Pirlo, no party, and that's exactly what they've gone for. And I think one other talking point as well is the youngster. I was saying a moment ago, the Swedish youngster, Kulusevski. He was on loan last season at Parma, was very, very good for them, which is why, of course, Juventus signed him up. Do you think we'll get to see much of him this season? Because we've had a couple of extra signings that have come into Juventus. In fact, we've had a signing yesterday in Alvaro Morata, who's returned to the club on loan from Atletico Madrid. Do you think he'll get many opportunities at Juventus this season, or do you think they should have maybe let him go out on loan again to someone like a Parma where he's guaranteed game time?
I think he showed his quality at Atletico Madrid. Of course, he had that little stint at Chelsea where he was a little bit stinky, but he's gone to Atletico Madrid and he's remade himself. And he was good when he was at Juventus. That's why all the interest was around him from Chelsea, Man United in the first place. I think he's gone somewhere where similar to Pirlo, where he is loved and people have got patience for him. I think it's a good move for him. I think he will stay.
And on Kulusevski, I think in terms of winger position for Juventus, I'm thinking Cuadrado's no longer a winger, so that automatically, frees up a spot. Bernardeschi has never, for me, hit the heights at Juventus that he ever did before. I know I think it's always said that Roberto Mancini for Italy loves him, but he's never quite found a spot or a home in this Juventus lineup. And I do think there's a spot for him. And I don't think he'll get, he's not playing 90 minutes week in, week out, but at that young age, you don't really need to. As long as you're playing, 60 minutes in this game, 90 minutes in a cup game, but bring on 20 minutes, picking up minutes, developing. I mean, if you want to be a winger, I know he's a striker now, but there's not much better in the world than Cristiano Ronaldo to learn from in training. So I think, to be honest, he could sit there with a book and probably learn more about being a winger and going out on loan to somewhere that's not really as talented. So I think there's a space for him in this Juventus team, and he's a little bit of an enigma because teams don't really know much about him. Obviously, they signed him from Parma last year, then loaned him back because they didn't need him. But now they're kind of doing not a summer clear out, but they're revitalising the squad a little bit. And I think there's a spot for Kulusevski going forward. It'll be quite interesting to see what he does.
I'm interested to see what Juventus do throughout the rest of the season. It was a very tight race last season. In fact, if you look at the league, it was only 1 point away from Inter Milan from winning the title, although the last couple of weeks it looked like Juventus were going to run away with things at the end. Do you think it's going to be a tighter season in Serie A? You know, teams like the Napolis and the Atalantas and teams like that pushing Juventus, or do you think maybe it'll go back to what we used to, and that's Juventus dominating the league?
It'll be tighter than the Bundesliga, can guarantee that. I think it depends on how they adapt to this system, because I did actually just get the game up to the left to see some of it, and apparently they're playing like a 3-5-2 at the moment, so it depends on how they adapt to this Pirlo system immediately. I think they'll win the league, but I don't know, they might run them close with Inter Milan, because Conte obviously is a more experienced manager, and I think we spoke a lot during the Europa League and the Champions League watch-alongs, and how some of these inexperienced managers get out-tacticked by yes, they bring a feel-good factor, but they always get tactically outclassed by the best of the best. And maybe that's what we'll see when these matches come up against each other, the Conte versus Pirlo. So maybe that might come into it, but I just think overall they're just a stronger team.
It's a great team indeed, and hopefully we'll have an interesting Serie A season to come. But that is, for now, our Games of the Week section in terms of last week's games. What we're now going to do is we're going to move on to the games ahead for the next week. Now, I've picked out these games, of course, from each of the leagues, and we're going to find out which games we're going to start off with, which, in fact, we're going to begin with the Premier League. So we're now going to move on to Games of the Week, the section, of course, that we had last year, which we are looking into the Games of the Week. And we've slightly changed it up a little bit, as I said before, at the beginning of the podcast. But this week, because I didn't have any games already from last week to look forward to, I've picked out some of the best games from this week, from next week, that we can look forward to. It's very confusing at the start, but we're going to start off with the Premier League, and the fixture that is coming up actually on Monday night is against Arsenal and Liverpool. Now, you can see on the screen right now, I put it originally as 8:15 kickoff, but they've now changed it to an 8 p.m. kickoff because of the curfews in the UK and how everybody... I think it was something like, I said to the boys, it was something like the last 6 minutes of the game would have been after 10 o'clock. So all of the people probably would have been kicked out with 6 minutes to go, which is the last thing that they want. So the game now does kick off at 8 p.m. UK time. But Liverpool, they come into the start of the season, 2 wins out of 2. Great win against Leeds, of course. A fantastic win against Chelsea. They now have to face another one of the big sides in Arsenal, who themselves had a pretty decent run at the start of the season. Good win against Fulham. Wasn't the best game in the world against West Ham. Me and Kieran L, of course, watched that game. But they did get a win in the end, so both teams do come into this without a loss so far. We already know Liverpool, they signed Thiago quite recently, so we might see a little bit more of him in this game compared to the last one. Arsenal themselves, they made plenty of signings. We've already started to see those, the likes of Gabriel Magalhaes as an example. But these two teams, they come into this game on pretty good form. Usually, it's quite a good match. We've seen a lot of entertaining games between Arsenal and Liverpool in the last couple of years. 4-3s, 3-2s, vice versa. Who do you think is going to win this game? Because on paper, it's a little bit closer than it has been in the last couple of years.
I think it'll be a Liverpool win. Is why I predict them to finish in the top 2. But I think Arsenal have shown a lot more fight so far in the past 2 games than they haven't since last season. They've made some signings I think have bolstered the entire squad. I mean, you look on the first day, Willian, who at Chelsea was good, and people thought he's going to Arsenal. He might not be able to do 3 assists on his debut. Obviously, he had a bit of a stinker against West Ham. Like I said, they made a few decent and more signings as well. I think they'll give more of a tough game. I don't think it'll be a clear path for Liverpool, clear walk. It'll be tough, but I think Liverpool have got the win. If Mane plays as he did against Chelsea, it'll be very hard for Arsenal to contain him.
Could be a tricky game indeed. In fact, Arsenal have beaten Liverpool 2 times over now, haven't they, technically speaking? Beat them in the Community Shield at the start of the season, beat them at the end of the Premier League. Of course, Liverpool were a bit drunk at that point, but let's not take that into account. Is anybody in the camp of Arsenal maybe winning this game?
No, but the podcast's boring if we don't. So I'm going to be devil's advocate, and I'll of course sit on the Arsenal bandwagon, because I feel like if we all went Liverpool, that's what I still think that's going to happen. However, I agree with you, Josh, in the fact that the chances of Arsenal winning are higher now than they have been for the past, I'm going to say 3, 4, 5 years with the way that Arsenal have been. I think structurally they're much better under Mikel Arteta. When we've seen them play Liverpool before, they've been at 6s and 7s. I think it was the opening weekend where Liverpool scored 4 on Mane's debut against Arsenal at the Emirates and tore them apart there. The last 2 times have been much closer. They find it much more difficult to, break the lines down between this Arsenal team and really cause some problems. I think they may come out on top, but I'm going to I'll back Arsenal just for devil's advocate reasons, really. And if you've got players like Aubameyang, Lacazette, and add Willian and even Pepe, I think they can cause Liverpool some problems. They've proven it, but you're asking them to win 3 times in a row against the Premier League champions. And this is a real test for this Arsenal team, because I think we spoke about it when we did the watch-along, that there will be dark waters for Mikel Arteta, and I think this might be his biggest test as Arsenal manager since he's come in. So if he passes it, then maybe we do start having to look at Arsenal for real top 4 contenders for this upcoming season.
That's the scary thing, the fact that Liverpool, of course, they are the Premier League champions, but you still look at this game on paper and think to yourself, Arsenal do have a very good chance of winning it. And of course, it is the beginning of the season. This game, it matters a lot. We've said before about how in the yesteryear, champions were able to afford to lose a couple of games here and there and not worry too much. We now live in a world where every game counts, and a draw could feel like a loss at the end of the season. There'll be those certain results you look at, maybe at the start of the season or in the midsection at Christmas time, where you look at those results at the end of the season and think they're the games that might have cost us the title. Of course, for Liverpool, they've got to go out there, they've got to show the class and the superiority of why they are the Premier League champions. But Kieran D, what do you think of this game? Who do you think Arsenal's going to win, or do you think Liverpool's going to win?
I think it's a little bit silly to back against Liverpool because they are the reigning defending Premier League champions. They're probably the strongest team in the league at the moment in time. Arsenal do seem to start the season well every season, though. They win the first 3 or 4 games. So it could go either way. I do agree with Kieran that it could go either way because of the quality in the Arsenal side. But I think it's a little bit silly to bet against Liverpool, especially at Anfield, where they haven't been beaten for 2 or 3 years at the stadium.
It's an incredible record. I think we're looking now above 60 plus games at Anfield where they haven't lost, which is a mental stat in itself. I know there's the stat going around about Mane, pretty much only lost 1 game at Anfield or something like that. It's a ridiculous record, but it should be a very good game on paper. It's a Monday night fixture, as I said, kicks off at 8 o'clock. And just kind of taking a back seat from the game for a second, looking at the 2 clubs in general, while the transfer window, as I said, is still open. We've seen Arsenal make a couple of good signings here and there. Willian from Chelsea was a speculative signing. There were some people in the camp of it's a great deal, some people in the camp of it's a shocking deal, paying for a 32, 33-year-old on expensive wages. But then they've topped that up with a couple of decent other signings elsewhere. They brought Gabriel Magalhaes from Lille. They're still trying to look into bring some other players on the side. In fact, of course, Thomas Partey has been one of those names that's been linked for weeks on end now. So it doesn't feel like Arsenal's transfer window potentially is done yet. Do you think there's a couple of signings that they need to make?
I was just going to say, obviously there was always room with Upamecano. I think hasn't he just recently signed a new contract with Leipzig?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the defence that you think needs upgrading? Do you think their attack and their midfield can do the job that the defence? Then if they upgrade the defence, they could actually be title contenders.
I think they're a while off the perfect team. To be honest, they're not anywhere near the Liverpools or Man Cities in terms of overall squad depth and overall talent. Really, I just don't think they're up there just yet. I think getting Dani Ceballos back was a nice little addition to the team. But if they had Aouar or Partey, which I very much doubt, because in this COVID era you can't actually spend as much money as you would originally because of it's took an effect on a lot of teams. You won't be able to tell with some of the deals going on, but I just don't think they could afford either one of them 2 star midfielders. And I do believe they still need a couple of centre-halves because David Luiz isn't going to be around forever. It's nice to see how Saliba may step up in the future, but I do think they're a while off being the perfect team.
I completely agree with you on that one. Still could see a couple of deals. I think we're about 9 days away from recording this, of course, when the transfer window does shut. And then you can look at the other side of this game with Liverpool. As I said, they've made a couple of signings themselves, Thiago being the main one, Diogo Jota coming in quite recently from Wolves as well. They still look like potentially they're looking at one or two other names. They were linked with Ismail Assar of Watford, Ozan Kabak of Schalke, which we talked about earlier, with Schalke's humiliating 8-0 defeat. I guess you can't look at that game exponentially to how good Kabak is, but it's a disappointing result. It might help them to a certain extent on getting the player through the door, but do Liverpool need to make any more signings? Because there was a lot of talk on social media in the last couple of days about the squad depth up top. The fact that they've only really got the likes of Firmino, Salah, Mane, Shaqiri, who's had injury problems, Brewster, who looks like he's out of his way, and now, of course, you can add to that list Diogo Jota and Origi as well, if he stays or goes, of course. Is there any other positions that the Premier League champions need to try and improve on with 9 days of the window left?
A star second centre-back. That is all they need from being, the most complete team is a star second centre-back to go alongside Virgil van Dijk. Because they've got good second centre-back. Joe Matip's a very capable player. We got him for free. Perfect deal, really. However, he's always injured. Gomez is not as good defensively as I'd like him to be, but he's got really nice recovery pace. But he's been shifted a little bit due to injuries in the past. Like, I don't remember him playing right back for a bit, and he's back at centre-back, which I do think is his best position, but I don't think I can trust him week in, week out. But they still need a little more depth for me, because a weird one selling Harry Wilson, I don't understand it. I think he could be a really nice depth player, but if he wants to go get first-team football, then credit to him. But I think they're like a Kalidou Koulibaly away, and then there's not much better you could do.
I was going to ask about centre backs because obviously Denaya's Skriniar is in talks with Tottenham, like who obviously you said Koulibaly, but Josh and KD. What centre backs or any other positions obviously the Liverpool need? Cause I would have said midfield as well, just for another big name. But they got Thiago, so
I think they need a replacement right back for Trent if he ever gets injured or if they ever just don't want to play him, because at the moment it is, I think, Nico Williams.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they need another right back, and they do need a centre half, but I don't think they'll go for necessarily one of the big names.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think a right back would be nice for them because although they had Nathaniel Klein, it's a shame he always got injured. So he's a decent backup, and that's why he's looking like he's going to go to Palace. So I would have probably agreed and said a backup right back would have maybe been a good idea, but we know what Klopp is like, and I do think they will sign Kabak. They'll go for this young Bundesliga defender, Turkish. He's got plenty of experience already in the Bundesliga. Great player on his day, and I think with tutoring under Klopp, he could become a very good player, but I can't see them going for a big centre-back just because it's very rare we ever see Liverpool spend big bucks. It's very, very rare we ever see a humongous sign. Not that, the likes of the Cities and the Uniteds and Chelsea all spend the big bucks here and there on certain players. Liverpool aren't that type of club. They do like to, spend 20, 30 million, which in this market today is a low amount of cash, but I think we will probably see maybe one centre-back through the door. But as I said, they're still looking at forwards as well. Ismail Assar potentially maybe coming in from Watford. That'd be quite a decent deal. A couple of the forwards, they've been linked with Ousmane Dembele on loan from Barcelona, so whether Barca do want to let him go and have a season in the Premier League to try and get his fitness levels back up and become a better player overall, we'll have to see and find out. But I'm going to ask you for your score predictions for this game. I'm going to start off with Kieran L. Arsenal-Liverpool, what's your prediction?
Again, I feel like everyone's going to go with Liverpool, so I'll just play devil's advocate. I'll go 1-1.
1-1. Robin?
2-2.
2-2.
Desmond.
Kieran D?
3-1 to Liverpool.
4-3 Liverpool, I'm going to go. We'd like some goals. We've had a lot of goals from the last week. Maybe we can have more goals this week. But that is Arsenal-Liverpool. It kicks off on Monday, 8 PM UK time, not 8:15, because of the UK curfew. We now move on to the Bundesliga, which came back last week, as we said before. Plenty of goals going on there, but we have a mammoth fixture, which it always feels like we have a mammoth fixture in the Bundesliga every single week. And what a game of football this is going to be. Bayer Leverkusen take on RB Leipzig. Now, when you actually look at these two sides on paper and how their transfer windows have gone, both teams have lost big players. You know, Leverkusen have lost Kai Havertz as their biggest player. RB Leipzig, they've lost Timo Werner. And then you can look at other players on the side that have left clubs. For example, Kevin Volland leaving Leverkusen, going to Monaco, and a couple other players on the side. But they've also made a couple of big signings. Leipzig have signed Hwang Hee-chan. That was a deal that was done quite a while ago. He can now start. Leverkusen have signed Patrick Schick. So they have made replacements. But you could say on paper that these two teams are a little bit weaker than they were last season. But Leverkusen, they didn't have the greatest of starts. They picked up a draw last weekend. And as for Leipzig, well, they've got to try and instantly get results because Bayern Munich getting an 8-0 win, it's going to put them in fantastic positive attitude ahead of the season as they try to go for their 9th Bundesliga title in a row. Now, these two teams on paper, as I said a moment ago, they're a little bit weaker than they were last season, although Leipzig have been able to keep on to most of their important players, including the likes of Upamecano, who we said a moment ago was linked to the likes of Arsenal and Manchester United. How do you see this game going on paper? Because it's probably, in my opinion, out of all the games we've picked for this week, the hardest game to predict.
If you're going off the last week's result, obviously Leipzig picked up a 3-1 win over Mainz and Leverkusen drew 0-0 against Wolfsburg. So it's shot like logistically you'd go with Leipzig just thing, but Leverkusen lost a team last year who at points I think they went through a spell of like not major results and then they started chaining a few victories together and like trying to solidify that Europa League spot and then 4th place as well. It can go either way. It's all to do with them strikers, obviously. Like you said, Leverkusen signing Schick and Josef Poulsen. But like you said, both teams are missing them players. It's going to be a very interesting season with both of them. I think Leverkusen is such a big miss with Havertz. He was so pivotal to that team from getting the goals. Same with Timo Werner. Timo Werner is a better striker than Josef Poulsen. But I think if they play to their strikers to some of these main players, we will have a very tasty game.
You've put me onto the perfect thing as well. Just to very quickly jump in, somebody I did forget to talk about, Alexander Soloff as well, just very recently signed in the last couple of days. Have I took the words out of your mouth?
I'll stop speaking because that was the point I was about to make. This isn't the star-studded matchup it was maybe last season or the year before because of the players, but as Josh robbed from my mouth, I trust Leipzig's contingent more than I trust Leverkusen's contingent with the addition of Sorloth, Hwang Hee-chan, Josef Poulsen. That is 3 players that, yes, they're not the level of Timo Werner, but put them all together and you'll get goals from any 3. You know, we saw that from Sorloth last year in Turkey. Will it translate? I think it will because I've seen him on the international stage with Norway and he looks a completely new player. So I'm happy to see him get a big move, and I just trust with also creativity wise, I believe more in Leipzig than I do Leverkusen because of the likes of Christopher Nkunku. I know most of them were to Werner, but got 14 assists I think last season.
Yep.
Whereas I don't see that creativity coming from Leverkusen, even though they do have, you know, the likes of Leon Bailey, Bellarabi, nice wing players that can get some balls into the box to Schick, but I just think Leipzig will nick it on the day.
One thing that's mental with... So I was going to say with Leipzig is that Nkunku sometimes doesn't even start. He comes off the bench, and yet he's hitting these plus 10 assists a season.
He was also utilised in various positions, because I remember you see the team sheet, he's at centre mid, he's at right mid in the team sheet, he's at striker next to Werner on the team sheet, and then they'll obviously manipulate that in game to the way Nagelsmann sees fit, but I think he's such a good deal that they managed to get, and I think in a few years' time, sadly, as we always talk with the Bundesliga clubs, he will leave but make a really, really tasty profit.
Well, where do Leverkusen go? Because if you look at their transfer business on paper, Havertz was never really replaced. Kevin Volland was replaced. Of course, Kevin Volland very recently moved to AS Monaco in France. So they did replace him with Patrick Schick, who was all right on loan. Had a brief spell at RB Leipzig, came in from AS Roma, about 25 million euros. It's a fairly big deal, but how did Leverkusen improve? Because they missed out last season on the Champions League pretty much on the final day. It was a case of Gladbach pipping them to the last spot, and they really did disappoint towards the end of the season. How did Leverkusen improve?
Maybe they. Oh, go on. Do you want? Sorry, Ron.
No, go on.
Maybe they trust in the players that they've got, because they signed Amiri last season, and he didn't really get as much game time, but he plays in that attacking midfield role, and he's still a young guy, so maybe they trust in him to step up, or maybe it's another younger player. I mean, I know he's primarily a winger, but that Wirtz that they had last season, that they gave a lot of game time to, that young lad. So I do believe in Leverkusen. They are next man up mentality from the youth players that they believe in. I wouldn't be surprised if the next man they believe to take over is Amiri.
You look at the team they put out though against Wolfsburg, and even though it was only really Havertz that was there, it seemed like your defence is probably the same. You got Herdecke, Bender, Tapsoba, and St. Graven. But then you look at your rest: it's Aaron Guiz, Bellarabi, Florian Wirtz, Demarabi, Diaby, and Ilario. And they're players that you don't think, oh, this guy can make an impact. But it's feel like when they're all working together, you maybe don't need the big guy to sort of pull it through. You've got shit coming off the bench, as you talked about, Amira coming off the bench. Like, you've got players who didn't even play. Jonathan Tah, who was a great centre back, Palacios, who was a good centre mid for the side. They have got average depth in terms of all the players on the team. I would say at the same level. Whereas last year you had Havertz, then everyone else. At least this year they're all sort of on the same pillar. Pillar? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, pillar's the right word.
I think that Leverkusen's biggest problem is the goal scoring, because we saw last year they were quite decent defensively, but they relied on Kai Havertz a lot to score goals when Kevin Volland was injured. Of course, I don't know if Patrick Schick can step into the shoes of Kevin Volland and pick up where he left off a little bit, but the goal scoring for them was just not. It wasn't up to the caliber where it should be. Their defence, I think they've got a very, very good, solid defence with the likes of Tapsoba, who's young. St. Graven is a really good fullback. Both the Bender brothers are quite reliable and experienced. I think the problem for them, like Rowan said, is probably that midfield and the terms of depth that they've got, and just the lack of goal scoring in there.
Well, at least with the signing they made, Patrick Schick has Bundesliga experience. At least that's one thing that he does have over the likes of, the Sorlov that they brought in, the Hwang Hee-chan that they brought in on the opposing side. At least Schick played for Leipzig himself. He'd love to get one over because they didn't want to buy him permanently. So that would be a nice way to say, well, you should have bought me then. But I do believe that he scored goals in the Bundesliga. Turner last year, when he came back, but the thing is, Schick was injured as well, and I don't want that to be re-aggravated when he goes to Leverkusen. But he's proven that he can score in the Bundesliga. Not many. Maybe this is the year where, as a starter, because I don't remember Schick being a starter since a bit younger in his career. So hopefully he can finally prove that he should have started for Leipzig more last year.
The thing is, he didn't even start last game, which is mental. Like, you brought him in. The thing I've also just realised Leipzig have got good striker depth. Sorloth, Hwang Hee-chan, and Yusuf Poulsen as well. So
they've got a lot of depth. I think if you compare the depth between the two teams, you would probably say that Leverkusen have better depth, but not better players. I think. Because it's looking likely Jonathan Tah is actually going to leave. You talked a moment ago, Rowan, about the defenders that they've got. They've got the Bender brothers. They've got Tapsoba, who is a fantastic player at the back from Burkina Faso. It looks like Jonathan Tah could be off to Leicester. They really, really want him, and it seems like Leverkusen are pretty fine with letting him go. But would you agree? Would you say Leipzig have got better depth across the board in general? Or would you say Leverkusen have got better depth? Because, as I said, I think Leverkusen's got better depth, but not better players.
Probably about equal. I think, on the top of my head, I think there's not much to split these two teams, and that's why it's so difficult to predict. I mean, even off the bench, I see players that are okay, but I don't see that man that's going to steal the game and grab it by the scruff of the neck in either side, to be honest with you. You were comparing midfielders like Marcel Sabitzer and Demirbe. They're quite good players, but no one's that next level. So I think in terms of depth, these two, I wouldn't be surprised if they are side by side in the table next in this come the end of the season.
I think it's going to be a real show of character for these two sides. I think we're all waiting for someone to really step up in both of these sides and show what they can do, like the likes of Christopher Nkunku, for example, or Patrick Schick, someone like that. We're waiting to see who's going to step up, because if nobody does, it might be quite a difficult season for both of these sides.
It could be a very difficult season indeed. We'll have to find out what happens. Of course, it is only match day 2, so it is going to take a little bit of time for these teams to get back up to the usual levels of football that they would play. Of course, the Bundesliga was the kind of first major league that came back, so it'll be interesting to see how these teams do, but we'll make our score predictions for this game between Bayer Leverkusen and RB Leipzig. I'm going to roll reversal it this time. I'll make my prediction first. I think I'm going to go 3-0 to RB Leipzig. Kieran D.
1-0 to RB Leipzig.
1-0 RB Leipzig. Rowan?
3-0.
3-0. Not bad. Kieran L.
1-1.
1-1. So no one is going for a Leverkusen win, which is interesting. But do put your score predictions in the chat. We'd like to hear what you've picked out, not just for this game, but the rest of the 5 major leagues. We've all made our predictions there. We're now going to move on to Serie A. There's a big game this week between Roma and Juventus. We now move on to Serie A, where, as I said a moment ago, there's a very big game between Roma and Juventus. And it's the start of the Serie A. That's also started last week with the Bundesliga. And Juventus, we spoke about them before. They had a very good result against Sampdoria. But this is now Andrea Pirlo's first big test as manager of Juventus. AS Roma, they have had a bit of a resurgence in the last couple of seasons. We haven't seen them in the Champions League for a while now, but they did get Europa League football this season, which is very good to see. But they made a couple of signings themselves. In fact, I think the biggest kind of transfer news to talk about with Roma is the impending potential deal with where Edin Dzeko is going to be going, because we still have absolutely no idea where Dzeko is going to be within the next week and a half. He's been linked with the likes of Juventus, who lost Morata recently, still looking for a striker. So could he go there? Or is he going to stay at the end of the day with AS Roma? Or the other swap deal that's potentially being called for was Arkadiusz Milik maybe going to AS Roma. Before we talk about this game, what should Roma do? Because it's a tough situation. There's a couple of days left of this deadline, the window shutting, so time is starting to run out for clubs to make these deals. Is it the right decision to let Dzeko go and maybe bring in a Milik, or do you think they should keep him because of his experience?
It depends what you're getting for him. If you're getting either money or a deal that'll benefit you more, well, they'll just benefit you, fine. The problem is currently you don't have a goal scorer. Like, you don't have a striker that can score you maybe 10 goals. In my opinion, you don't. So keep him until you've got an ample replacement. The problem is you might have to use sell Dzeko to bring in that replacement. So might be a couple of weeks, obviously there's not long left, where you don't have that striker. And obviously, again, the 0-0 against Verona is not the result that you'd expect and want from a Roma side.
Well, they got an L to Verona is what they got, because Diawara royally screwed that up for them. So they ended up losing that game. But
So they think it was Diawara's fault.
No, it wasn't Diawara's fault. It was whoever did the squad registration thing. But, maybe his birthday was the day before the game. Who knows? But I think for Dzeko, if you swap in Milik for Dzeko, I don't mind the deal, because Dzeko is older in his career, whereas Milik is going to slowly enter his prime, and you'll probably get the prime of Milik. But they've had the prime of Dzeko, and which will be better? I think you'd have to weigh that up as well, because I don't think Juventus are going to go for him now. They've just got Morata. There's no way they're going to go for him now. So I think if you swap in, straight swap, no money involved, there might be, but a straight swap, I actually don't mind the deal. However, again, I think we've spoke about this a lot today with some players. Milik could never get a run of string of games at Napoli, be that via injuries or the form of Mertens as a central forward. So you are getting a rusty, but a player that can score goals when he gets the opportunity. So I take that swap deal if I was Roma.
It'll be an interesting one, because it is like right now a Serie A transfer merry-go-round with the vast amount of players that seems to be moving around the Italian clubs, and this is an interesting deal because as you perfectly said there, of course, Mertens being the centre forward for Napoli and just being ever so consistent means that Milik's kind of not potential, but his talent needs to be unlocked because he hasn't had the opportunity at Napoli to be able to do so. But I thought I'd bring that up. I think there's a lot of questions for the majority of clubs that we're talking about, which in fact there's going to be very big questions to ask about Barcelona a little bit later on when we talk about their game. But Juventus, as you've said a moment ago, Kale, once again, they've recently signed Alvaro Morata on a loan deal, which was a fantastic signing for them. He can come back on a permanent. And they've also had the other signings as well in the background. Kulusevski came in, of course, a couple of months ago, started that first game. Weston McKennie joined on loan. They made a couple of big signings. Andrea Pirlo, he really needs to stake his claim on this game and get the first 3 points because this is his first big test. But do you think he can do it?
Yes. I genuinely think it's going to be quite easy. And I don't mean to disrespect Roma. Yeah, I don't mean to disrespect Roma. But I think another week under Pirlo's tutelage, I think they've got a better team. I think they're cohesively better as a unit. And as we say, Dzeko's going to be possibly benched because they don't want to play a man they might be losing. So I just don't see Roma causing that much of a problem. So I mean, if they can barely cause problems to Verona, I don't think they're going to cause any to Juventus. So if they get everyone registered, though, they have a chance.
Does anyone disagree? Does anyone think Roma can potentially beat Juventus?
I think it's a walk in the park for Juventus. You look at the side, you look at Roma. If they're not going to play Dzeko, you're not going to have a striker. And yeah, I think it's easy for Juve.
Walk in the park. Is it a hat trick, Kieran D? Juventus walking it?
Yeah.
There we go, hat trick.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, one very quick question that I've just thought in my mind. Chris Smalling, of course, he looks like he's going to be moving as well. What's your thoughts as a Man U fan? Would you want him to have stayed to have him as a squad depth player who can come in, or are you quite happy to let him go to Roma and take the cash?
I think all of our team is resigned to him leaving. So 20 million. We need all the money we can get. It looks like at the moment. He probably is one of our best centre halves. Look at the way we defended the other night. But I'll take the cash. He did well in Serie A as well. So it might be the best move for his career.
He did very well, and they seem incredibly desperate to sign him. I think the amount of quotes that have come out within the last month of the manager saying he wants Smalling, I'm surprised he hasn't signed up by now, and even now when we're recording this, still hasn't signed. But 20 million in the bank maybe for Manchester United. All of you guys said you think Juventus are going to whitewash them, of course. Ronaldo getting on the score sheet in that first game means he's going to be up for it. They've got a lot of players who are fighting for their spots now. And maybe there might be a little bit more transfer business for Juventus to do. But we'll make our score predictions for this game. We're going to start off with Rowan this time.
4-0 Juventus.
Wow. Well, I've just seen the look on Kieran L's face. I'm guessing you were going to go 4-0. So I'm going to come to you now.
I was going to go 4-0. But instead, you know what? No, it's all right. 4-1.
4-1. So we'll go back for Roma.
Pissed off if it'll be 4-1 now.
So it's tight predictions between Rowan and Kyle. KD, what are you going for?
3-1 to Juve.
3-1 to Juve. I'm going to go 2-1 to Juve. I think it'll be a tight game. And I think maybe Roma might surprise a few. And when I mean surprise, I don't mean surprise as in go out there and batter them off the park, but give them a fairly close game. Because you've got to remember, this is only Andrea Pirlo's technically second full game in charge in Serie A. So this is his first major test. And you have no idea what he's going to do. We said earlier in the first game that they played against Sampdoria, they've gone back to the 3-5-2 system, what they used to play a couple of years ago, which suits the centre-backs better. But whether they're going to work for Pirlo or not in this game against Roma, we will have to find out. But once again, put your score predictions in the chat as always. It'll be interesting to see if anybody does go for AS Roma. And it should be a very good game of football, which is played on 27th of September, 7:45 p.m. We are now at our final game of games of the week, and this is a fairly interesting one, unless you're KL. Well, you said in your La Liga prediction you weren't too bothered, but no, this one's going to bring up a bit of a debate actually, because Barcelona take on Villarreal. Now, as you will have known, not just in La Liga, but in the other leagues, some of the teams have started a little bit later than the rest. We saw Man United, of course, start late. We've seen Real Madrid start late, and so have Barcelona. So this is their first game back since the 8-0 drubbing of Bayern Munich, which I'm pretty sure a lot of Barcelona fans are going to want to forget that by now, but it's going to come up for the rest of their lives. But they've got a big game against Villarreal, which is coming up on the 27th of September at 8 p.m. UK time, which means there's a lot of good games on that Sunday night. Now, Barcelona, they've got a brand new manager now, Ronald Koeman, which, since we did the 8-2 watch along, we haven't actually really spoke about that. We knew that it was Ronald Koeman who was coming in. Was it the right manager? Do you think maybe he's the right person to have a year in charge and then somebody else come in, or do you think they could have gone elsewhere?
I mean, could it have got much worse?
Yeah.
Well, probably they could have had like one of many reject managers, like Dino Maria could have gone.
Sure.
They could have.
You never know with the way Barcelona are.
Many managers make the step from Holland to Barcelona. Sorry, Kieran.
No, continue. Go on.
I'm done. I just want to say that many a manager made the step from Holland to Barcelona.
Oh, go for it, Kyle.
I just think he's very much. I think we spoke about it. I think when it got announced, I don't know if it was the night of the thing or the rumor was that it was going to come in. He's just a sacrificial lamb. If he does well, great. If he does crap, he wasn't meant to be there anyway. So it's literally no risk, no reward with this. It's just literally a manager just to fill a gap until they decide what the future of the club is, and more importantly, next summer, know what the future of the man that's been carrying Barcelona for however many years, the future of Lionel Messi is. So I just think it's not an inspiring signing, but also Frank de Boer's replaced him at Holland, so maybe that could have been worse. You could have had Frank de Boer.
Very true. I mean, Frank de Boer as a Barca manager. Do you know what the crazy thing is? It could have happened with Frank de Boer's record, although he got sacked very early at Crystal Palace. He just seems to be the type of manager that gets big jobs. Don't know how he does, but he somehow seems to get them all the time. But you've brought me onto the perfect thing to talk about. It isn't about Lionel Messi, because we did talk about him in the previous episode about how he stayed, but it's about the signings that they've currently made this summer. Of course, they've let a couple of players go and looking at bringing a few more players in. So in the last couple of days since we did the first episode back, we now know that Luis Suarez last night, in terms of when we recorded this, has now left for Atletico Madrid, which was on a free, but up to £6 million in performance bonuses, which I was a little bit annoyed. I don't know if you guys will have seen, or I think other people have seen, the reaction from some fans to the way that some of the players have left. So take into account other players that have left. Ivan Rakitic going to Sevilla, Nelson Semedo moving to Wolves, obviously Suarez going to Atletico Madrid. I think the reaction of some of these fans to the players leaving are ruthless, to put it nicely. There were fans appreciative of Luis Suarez because he is a club legend. He will go down as one of their best ever number 9s. His record will go down for quite some time. He's the third highest top scorer in Barcelona history, which is an incredible record in itself, and 198 goals for a club of that quality is very, very good indeed. But the way some of the fans were reacting was if he'd scored, 8 goals in his entire career. They're ruthless fans.
I think it's out the pram in it for Barcelona fans. I think they need to realise that. I mean, they've been a little bit spoiled, haven't they? Because they've had the best of the best for however many years, and now the best of the best is filtering to other clubs.
I mean, it's the Spanish fans. Sorry, I was going to say the Spanish fans that expect so much of their club. So when something doesn't go what they used to, they won't stop hounding the club until it's fixed.
I think it only makes sense to them group of fans. If you know what I mean, like us from the outside will never understand what it's like, because again, when Juventus sacked Sarri, we all thought they won a league. I don't understand what the whole point is. And it is, big clubs are entitled. That is exactly what it is. It's all of them. So it's suddenly a player who doesn't sign for your club, they're finished. I saw a lot of things like you, Josh. The moment he went to Atletico Madrid, all I saw was that he was finished, he's washed up, he's been cracked for 3 years or something like that. And I'm just like, no, he hasn't. He's scored so many goals over so long that, He'll be paying a crap ton of wages. They will be, but for free, you can't really get a striker like that as good as that. The only one I can think of recently is Edinson Cavani, you could have had for free. But I just think it's the whole, if your team's been at the top for so long, you are entitled and you just become spoilt brats, really.
And this is where the problem is, and you can look at maybe now Barcelona's scouting and recruitment system. The players that I've mentioned that have left the club, I've completely forgot even Arturo Vidal. If you look at the deals themselves and how they've worked for the players leaving the club, of course, you just said a moment ago, Luis Suarez left on free, which he'd indeed, 6 million in performance bonuses, not a great deal of money, although he's getting on of age. Ivan Rakitic left for a couple of million euros. Not a great deal. Once again, he's getting on with age, but you'd have expected a couple of million more. Remember when he was being linked to the likes of Arsenal, and it was like 15, 20 million pounds. That's the type of money you would have maybe expected. Arturo Vidal, left on a free. The only player they made some cash for right now is Nelson Semedo, which was about 30 million pounds. And there's still the players who look like they're going to be leaving the club. Todibo, the French centre-back, he's been linked with a move to Fulham. £20 million potentially for him, which would be a great deal, I think, for Fulham. Great prospect. Or he could go to Stade Rennes on loan. So he's got two options on the table. And they're still looking at one or two other players, trying to get them out the door, but they're not getting no cash for them. Is it bad recruitment at Barcelona?
I think they've just been buying players in their prime, and it's hard to get resale value when you buy a player in their prime because you're paying a premium price when they are in their prime. I mean, Philip Coutinho's prime was at Liverpool, so they bought him at the highest price and they're not going to make that money back. There's no chance. Suarez, prime straight after Liverpool, goes to there. They had their glory years where everyone was in the prime because that's when they bought them. And now they're surprised that when everyone's got older, they can't make that same amount of money. But that's what you get. Some teams, Dortmund, buy young, don't quite get their prime, they get the pre-prime, but make a shit ton of profit. Whereas Barcelona sign them when they're proven, they're impressive, yes, but you lose money because on transfer sales. You obviously make money because of all the competitions you win with all of them in their prime. You've seen that. But you can't expect to make a profit. So I think their transfer strategy is different, but it does breed success. So we've seen that. So who are we to say it's wrong? However, for me, I prefer the buy young, get a little bit of the prime, and then sell them for a lot of money, even though it might not bring as much success. But financially, in transfers, it's better.
And that's where the guard might be changing. In fact, the transfers that they now want to bring in are younger players. We talked about Memphis Depay last week. That's a deal that seems to be in limbo right now. But he's a lot younger than what they've been bringing in over the last couple of years. And the most recent one, which actually came out last night, looks like this could be a done deal in the next couple of days. Rowan, I think you'll be excited over this one. Serginho Dest moving to Barcelona. That one looks like that's going to be done and dusted. So is the guard changing? Have they done exactly what you said, Kieran? Looked at clubs like Dortmund and thought, we are pretty much 100 times bigger than Dortmund. It's not a case of us buying younger players and losing them because we are Barcelona and we can hold on to them. Is the guard changing now?
I think so. I was going to say, I think so. I think the problem with a lot of the players is Dest is Ajax and Eredivisie is very different to La Liga. And I feel like when the Bundesliga sides do it, for some reason it feels like an easier slotting from these other European leagues, like your Austrian league, your Dutch league, stuff like that. I feel like they sort of go hand in hand with the Bundesliga, but the La Liga is very different. I think Dest will be great, and I know that it's between Bayern and the thing. He's more Bayern and Barca. He's more wants to join Barca than Bayern. So obviously that's why he said Barca's the more likely. It'd be a good signing. He's young up and coming. I only know him from FM, but I've done a little bit of research. He's good up and coming. It'll be a great signing for the future. Semedo going is poor because he is a great player, but he's great for Wolves. You're bringing in a replacement. It would just be interesting because Messi's going to leave next year, isn't it? I think, or he's going to retire at least. Who have you got there? His replacement, is it Dembele?
You'd have probably said it would have been Ousmane Dembele.
And then their striker would be Griezmann, now that Suarez has left. and someone sorts Fatty on the left.
I mean, I don't think another transfer epitomises my point more than Antoine Griezmann, because they got him in his prime, but I think their transfer strategy changed. Maybe I think it might have been last year. Do you know when they started? They bought Frankie De Jong, and I don't know if that's just because he was he looks like a generational midfielder. So I'm not sure whether that's the reason, or they did buy him for his potential. Because give it 5 years, and they could sell him for more than they bought him for, quite simply. But I think their transfer strategy has changed a little bit, because for all the bad transfers they've done, and they're not terrible because they did bring success, but Ter Stegen was a great deal, and they could easily make profit on him. So for every the problem is, I think I've got with Barcelona, for every one good deal, there was 4 ones that they won't make profit on. But I think it started last year with the likes of bringing Frankie De Jong, and I think you'll see the likes of Ansu Fati rise. I saw a quote from Ricky Puig saying he will not go anywhere else. He'll play for Barcelona B until he can play for Barcelona. They still have that aura about them that can get them these young players, and everyone dreams of playing for them. And I think the strange thing for me though with Dest is maybe you'll get more starting opportunities at Barcelona, but do you have more ready-made success at Bayern Munich?
It's a tough choice for him, and I guess it's a choice that every football player would absolutely love to have right now. Would you want to join a team like Barcelona, who, let's not get it wrong, they are a massive club, and just because they lost 8-2 doesn't mean they're going to be terrible forever? Or do you want to go and join the current European champions, Bayern Munich? It's a great choice to have, and he's got that luxury right now to pick. But there is another team that has had the change of the guard, of course, Villarreal. They've had a lot of new players come in, and a new manager as well. Unai Emery, a manager who's been painted not with the brightest of colours for his time at Arsenal and PSG. He's now the Villarreal manager. Very, very well known in La Liga, of course, for his time at Sevilla. Was part of the incredible run of the 3 Europa League trophies. He's a fantastic manager on his day, and now he seems to have got a foothold of a club that looks to be on the rise. They've brought in a couple of big new players. They brought in Parejo and Coquelin from Valencia, of course, on a cheap deal. Geronimo Rulli, formerly of Sociedad, he joined quite recently as well. Kubo on loan from Real Madrid. Can Villarreal get into the Champions League spots? Because we said last week on the podcast that the top 4 can be very similar at times. You've got the 3 major teams in Atletico Madrid, Barcelona and Real Madrid. Then you have teams like Sevilla, Bilbao, Sociedad, Villarreal. Bringing in Unai Emery is a massive statement in the Liga, whether fans want to kind of face the reality or not. He's a big manager. Just because he had a bad time at PSG and Arsenal doesn't mean he's a terrible manager forever. Could this be a big opportunity with the signings that Villarreal have made to finally get back in the Champions League?
Hopefully.
Yeah, I think they need to show some sort of progression. I think there's a lot of teams this calendar year that need to show progression, and Villarreal definitely one of those teams that have been disappointed for the past couple of years, and it might be their time to wake up the sleeping giant. Or the sleeping submarine.
You could indeed, the sleeping yellow submarine. They've got already big players. They've got Gerard Moreno, who was fantastic last season for them, scored plenty of goals. Paco Alcacer didn't have the best of starts for Villarreal, but if you can get him up and running, you've got 2 very, very good strikers. And before Parejo and Coquelin came in, they were, Gerard Moreno was banging in the goals. Now he's got Parejo, a player of extreme quality, one of La Liga's very best midfielders, who, he's in his early 30s, got a couple of years left in him. God knows what can happen, because they've made a lot of really good signings, but they've got to face Barcelona in their 3rd game of the season. And right now, is this an opportunity for Villarreal to exploit Barcelona, and on match day number 1, technically, for Barcelona, not provide a shock, but maybe bring some of these Barcelona fans back to reality again?
Well, is it match day number 1? Because when did Messi score a hat-trick against Granada?
The one that I found.
Was it a friendly? I was going to say, I know they've been playing pre-season.
For Villarreal, it would be match day 3, but technically for Barcelona, this is their 1st game back in La Liga.
It's weird, because as Kieran said earlier, Man United looked shoddy coming back. And some of it, I know he said it wasn't an excuse, but some of it could be attributed to not having any pre-season. But then Man City went and beat a Wolves team after they had no time back. So is it or isn't it? Were Man United bad or was it tiredness? Were Man City good or was it just it's so weird this season. But if you've got a man like Messi, I won't really bet against them beating Villarreal.
So it comes on to the perfect time now to make the score predictions for this game, Barcelona v Villarreal. It looks like a great game on paper, and I'm going to start off with, let's start with Kale. Score predictions for this game.
3-1 Barcelona.
3-1 Barcelona. Rowan.
2-0.
2-2. Interesting. KD.
2-1 Barca.
2-1 Barca. 2-1 Villarreal.
He's gone for him.
I'm going to go for it. I'm going to back the mighty Unai Emery to beat Barcelona in their first game back. And it's an interesting one because I think, once again, put your score predictions in the chat. I think this game on paper will be one of those where people will put very different predictions in because who knows what this Barcelona side is going to look like because they've got plenty of transfers to do. They are going to probably be the busiest club within the next 9 days. They have to sign players now, quite frankly, because they haven't brought in a lot of cash, but they're going to have a feasible amount of money to spend for the last 9 days. And obviously, we're going to have to find out who they bring in. But put your score predictions in the chat as always. We'll have a look at them, see who is right at the end of the week. But that is our Games of the Week section done and dusted. So there we are. We've made our predictions for next week's fixtures, so do keep your eyes out. Of course, next week we'll go through those games, see who got their predictions right and wrong, and I probably get mine horribly wrong with the Barcelona game, but that is it for the podcast for now. Thank you very much, as always, Kieran L, Kieran D, and Rowan for joining me as always.
Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. But in the meantime, there is plenty more that you can look out for on the Sports Corner YouTube channel. Of course, we have plenty of our other podcasts available. Our podcast is going to be up. We're looking to do it on a Wednesday. We are pre-recording them, as I said, for now. But today's edition should have gone up on Thursday, I hope, if it renders in time. But our other podcasts, of course, on a Tuesday morning, you can join Rowan and Simon for the wrestling podcast. What did you talk about on this week's edition?
It was a strange week. There was not much going on, and then all of a sudden on Monday, just thought, we're just going to fuck it up, and we had one of the strangest episodes of Raw. But yeah, this week, be next week, obviously next Tuesday, we have got Clash of Champions this weekend, so we'll talk about that. We had a stellar episode of NXT. We had a half-decent episode of AEW, but it's Clash of Champions this weekend. Some big matches going on, so we'll be reviewing that.
Just keep your eyes out for that. You can watch last week's edition. It's available now. And then, of course, it's available on a Tuesday morning. You can watch it live and talk to the boys as they talk about all of the news in wrestling. On a Friday, of course, we have the NFL Corner with Kieran and Will. What are you talking about this week?
Well, this week was a very interesting week in the NFL. We apologise for no episode last week. Will was having technical difficulties. Hopefully, you'll tell me tomorrow that they're all sorted, but we'll get to it soon. We'll just talk about the week that just passed in the NFL. We'll talk about Seattle's goal line stop. We'll talk about the Raiders shocking the Saints. And it's just everything's heating up. We've still got 11 unbeaten teams. Who will remain unbeaten coming into week 3? We'll find out and we'll tell you about it tomorrow.
Will there be double Jags, considering Jags would have played 2 games when you're recording?
Yes, because they do. Because obviously tonight is Jacksonville versus Miami. We'll have instant reaction to that tomorrow. Very tired reactions, but instant. And then hopefully we'll be saying that they have the best record out of all of us, which was what we least expected coming into this year.
Yeah.
But keep your eyes out for it.
And, Cowboys comeback. An unbelievable scene on Sunday night when they were, I think they were 29 down, at some point. And they managed to come back with a field goal in the last second of the game. And the house went into raptures, especially Will. You couldn't watch the kick, but we'll get all into that tomorrow. What an exciting season it's going to be.
There's always lots of drama. You can keep your eyes out for that as always. And we have plenty of other content available on the channel. We have our tier list, which should be back soon. We've got plenty of watch-alongs still to come as well. We've got a watch-along on Friday, which me and Kyle will be doing for the Bundesliga. I assume by the time that this is up, the Super Cup will probably finish, so I'll not advertise that one for now. But we've got a couple of other watch-alongs as well. Monday, we've got Arsenal-Liverpool. So one of the games that we have predicted, we are going to be covering 8 p.m. And luckily, there's no coffee for us because we're not going to be in a bar, so at least we can still be live after 10 o'clock. But as for now, thank you ever so much. No, F1 Sunday, is it?
Yeah, it is on Sunday. We're in Russia.
What time? Is it a little bit earlier?
It is early. I think this is 11:30. I'll just quickly check. It's an early because it's obviously in Russia. The time difference. It's 12:10, so we'll be live at 12.
Bit earlier for
For a
you,
little
Rowan.
bit of a lunchtime race.
Bit different for you. Usually used to. Is it 2:10 for the start of the race?
Yeah, 2:10 afternoon. It's a bit early. Bit of a lunchtime race, but very fun. Boring track, but
Hopefully,
you've got me for a good 2 hours.
hopefully there's a little bit of drama because the last couple of weeks have been fairly eventful in F1.
I think in the past 3 races we've had 4 red flags, which hadn't happened since 2016, I think, or 2018. So 2 years or 4 years. So it's been very dramatic.
And hopefully it can be dramatic on Sunday. Keep your eyes out for that. I always forget one at the end. But of course, F1 watch along on Sunday, a little bit earlier, of course, with it being in Russia. But as for now, thank you very much for watching. We'll be back with a couple of watch alongs, of course. But in terms of the podcast, we'll be back next Wednesday with an episode. But have a great rest of your week. And we'll see you later. Goodbye.